Well, I must say it does feel weird to be cutting out this kind of neat old steering setup, but it was put together with drift pins, bronze drift pins, I believe, at the joints, and I can't drift them out no matter what I've tried. So, yeah, it's coming out. Okay, this is a bit nerve-wracking. This is the exhaust pipe. And it exits the transom just at the waterline. 3-inch travels forward through a very heavy metal tube into an incredibly heavy-duty old steel muffler. I don't know if I'm replacing it, but I don't want to just make a notch around the bulkhead for it. I either want to put a neat hole and pass it through the bulkhead, or I want to put a bulkhead fitting where the exhaust is on both sides. Not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, but it's got to come out for now, which is a bit unnerving because largely this is right at the water level. Right now, because there's no tanks or water or anything in the back of the boat, it's a good 6 inches above the water level out there. But it's still kind of creepy to take it apart because, well, the boat rocked or whatever. So I do have a tapered plug to put in it, and I'm hoping I'm not going to have it apart too long. I'm going to pay very close attention to it. All right, let's see if it'll come off. I've got the clamps off. The hose seems to be in pretty good shape, like as if it's almost relatively, oh my gosh, it's coming off easy. Oh, there is a fair amount of water in it. There we go. That's all water that was in the muffler. Let's just move the power tools out of this link here. Yeah. Just a little water in the muffler. That's kind of gross. I mean, I know that a lift muffler protects water from getting back into the manifold, but I thought there was supposed to be a bit of a lift here as well, something to look into. That's another reason I want to take this apart, because I'm not sure this was really done right. A failure anywhere along here and the boat would sink. Well, let's see if I can get it off the back fitting. There we go. A rather massive chunk of rubber. The actual outlet in the transom is a nice big cast bronze affair, lots of threads, and at one point it had a pipe welded or brazed possibly to it, but it's completely given way at the bottom, and my hose was over the threaded section of this, but I don't think that's an approved fitting. So this may need a little more attention than I was planning to give it. Fortunately, it's well above the waterline right now, and I'll go outside and I'll put this plug in. All right, so I've hammered the plug in from the outside and gave it a little more of a look. It's possible maybe that I can just cut off this bit of tube and maybe find a threaded adapter for this. Unfortunately, when this was brazed, a lot of bronze or something dribbled around the bottom of the threads here. Anyway, that would be a hell of a thing to remove and a hell of a thing to be able to afford to replace. Anyway, not today's project. Carry on with the bulkhead here. Let's go, let's go. Okay, well there's the base cut out. I've given myself just some rough stock at the bottom to scribe against the hull because I didn't have a template for that. So a little using a toolbox, tool totes as a workbench isn't the greatest idea. If you can read that, it says air tools, and this bin is full of my compressor and air lines. So I imagine I've sliced them all to ribbons. Whoa. It looks like I just made it. Oh, God. Yeah, okay, so that wasn't brilliant. Anyway, didn't cut the hose, only cut the bin. Right, let's start scribing this to fit. And on and on and on we go. So, starboard side is done. The edge piece for the port side is done, and it's exactly parallel, which is really important, obviously. Because I have a little saggage here, I had to make sure I prop this up before I set in the centerpiece. And here's the remains of the old one, which of course was the most rotten of the whole, well actually the whole thing was a bloody mess. Again, it's two pieces. This was the upper piece. This is the, well, drip, sill, whatever you want to call it, and lower piece. I'm basically put them back together to create a template. Anyway, this should go in pretty easy because it's exactly 48 inches wide, the width of a sheet of plywood wide. And then I'll just drop in a little piece for the sill, because after all, the floor in the cockpit is at this height, and I have to create another piece in under there. It's kind of nice just walking in practically level for the last couple of days, but that can't go on. Then I clean up, then start to figure out what I'm going to do about tanks, and start to build the cockpit sole, which is going to be a little more complex. But anyway, let's get going. Well, now we got to develop a way to attach the various boards together. Obviously, that edge there is a long butt joint against the big panel, which is now back on the bench here. And there's a small section which is right there, which is the piece which is underneath the opening. And so it's got to be butt attached here, butt attached there, and that's got to be butt. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put splines in, and I've just made a little fence for my little hand router. You can see a 1/4 inch bit in there. And what that does, a couple pieces of scrap here, is puts a nice 1/4 inch groove. And I have this nice oak I'm going to use as a spline that will do a nice job of splining those together. And it's not very straight cut, that's why it's not a perfect line, but that's actually all set up just perfectly. Okay, so I'm going to cut all the grooves and then make up some spline material, and then I'm going to start epoxying. Basically, I'm going to use CPES, clear penetrating epoxy sealer, to seal all the edges of the plywood. I'm not going to epoxy the inside face of this because I want it to be able to breathe from at least one side. I'm one of these believers that you shouldn't completely encapsulate wood. There should always be one side of it that it can possibly breathe off, ideally the side that's driest and easiest to dry. In that case, it's the inside. The outside will be completely painted with it. There's going to be more mahogany put on the outside of that as well to protect it, but I do want it to be as waterproof as possible. Okay, let's get splining. Alright then, need a handy dandy mixing container. Just quick trip up to the recycling booth or box, whatever you want to call it. Get a nice clean somebody's water jug, and we'll turn this into just the perfect epoxy mixing container. They don't slice my belly open. There we go, just perfect. Now this is the Smith's brand, available in British Columbia, Canada, of CPES, clear penetrating epoxy, and I've never used before. I've used other ones. I've used Git Rot and another couple, and I haven't found Git Rot, for instance, to be particularly thin. I don't know how well it penetrates. Well, I suppose it penetrates okay, but I'm really hoping this stuff is thinner. Apparently it's the consistency of diesel fuel, which is thin-ish, but it is an oil after all. So anyway, let's see what we can do with this. Mix equal parts. Because the bottom of this container isn't exactly flat, I'm going to have to put a little more one than the other. This is nice. Child-proof cap. Gotta be Hercules, get this cap off. Alright, I'm using vice grips. I hate to do this because as soon as you put vice grips on there, you crimp it and it won't be square anymore. But there's not often I can't open a jar, I'll tell you. There we go. I don't know if you can see this. I don't want to spill it out, but it is at least as thin as diesel. Maybe it'll thicken up as it starts to react. But this is cool. Very pleased. Okay, so I'm just going to mop it on various places here. And see if I can't get it to soak in a bit. Alright, that's reasonably saturated into there. Let's go put this over here somewhere. Before my finger's too sticky, I'll shut you off so you don't have to watch any more of this. Let's call that enough. See you later. In. Well, how about this? Just did a bit of a cleanup and a full restored bulkhead. I'm thrilled. I still haven't done all the final screwing it down and of course caulking and sealing it, but I'm really pleased with the way it's all pulled together. This splice with the spline in it, I soaked it and soaked it and soaked it with epoxy. I didn't actually get quite enough on down there, but I can always put some more on. Wow, one of those really miserable, or you thought was going to be miserable jobs that actually worked out relatively well.